Did the Oklahoma Sooners accomplish everything they needed to in the transfer portal?
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, Sooner Nation? Welcome to Locked On Sooners, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Today's episode is brought to you by Monopoly Go. Game off. We got to talk about it. This fast-paced game lets you team up with friends for tournaments to unlock awesome prizes like unique stickers for trading, cool playing pieces, and hilarious emojis for taunting your friends. So download Monopoly Go, now free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. My buddies here is Josh Helmer. You can follow him on Twitter at JoshOnRef. You can also hear him Monday through Friday from 9 to noon on the KREF Sports app. And Josh, the transfer portal window is closed, but Oklahoma has made some splashes in the spring portal window, adding Jermayne Lole, defensive tackle from Louisville, also played some time at Arizona State, adding Branson Hickman from SMU, and the big domino, Damonic Williams. Should we just suggest that as a nickname, maybe? Dominic Big Domino Williams? I don't know, just off the top of my head. But it was a successful transfer portal period for them. I think it would have been successful had they not landed Williams. But if I was going to put a letter grade on that, I'd probably put an A+ on it for they were able to get the three guys that they were most heavily targeting in the spring portal period, and they got all three.
Well, it definitely takes it from whatever grade you had beforehand to A territory and above, adding Damonic Williams, which, by the way, just the big domino would be a terrific nickname for a defensive lineman. So the big domino would be pretty good. I love what Oklahoma did. And, if you look around the sports web out there, you'll see all sorts of different transfer portal rankings from 247 Sports, On3, Rivals, you name it, right? Well, ESPN I'm sure their writing staff takes that and then they kind of dissect and toss their own opinions on it and put together their top 50 spring transfer portal guys. And at any rate, Damonic Williams, Jermayne Lole, Branson Hickman, every single one of them, all three of those guys were in ESPN's top 50 spring transfer portal players. So from that standpoint, if you take that as gospel or you just take that information and just look at it, you say, okay, well, Oklahoma got a trio of the top guys on the board in the spring window at positions of need. We knew that center was a position that Oklahoma wanted to try to fortify. We knew defensive tackle was a position that Oklahoma wanted to try to fortify a little bit. They got the biggest name there in Damonic Williams. Lole, we'll see, right? The Arizona State career started out so great. And you look at Pro Football Focus, he was sort of regarded as one of the top interior guys early in his career. And then injuries have sidelined and slowed it a little bit the last couple of years. That final year at Arizona State, the first year at Louisville, and obviously the last season at Louisville, what did he make, the 8 starts or so? I think he can help. Lole can help OU a little bit. I just don't know how much quite yet. But hey, I think Oklahoma, for its part, accomplished a lot of its transfer portal goals, the big ones that it had on the board.
Yeah, by adding both Williams and Lole, you get now 4 guys that you can play at that nose tackle spot with Williams and Lole and Dejon Terry and Jaden Jackson. If you need to bump one of those guys over to help you out at that defensive tackle, that 3 technique spot with Grayson Halton, I think a guy like Lole can help you there. You can bump Jaden Jackson over there for a few snaps as well. You've got so much better depth at defensive tackle right now than you did heading into the offseason when Dejon Terry was the only guy that played more than 100 snaps for you on the roster last year. So you're in a much, much better place. And it's just a testament to the recruiting job that Todd Bates and Brent Venables and Zach Alley have done to be able to solidify that spot, because you had to add just some experience. And you've got that now with Terry and Lole and Damonic Williams. You've got a lot of snaps under those belts. And you're going to feel a lot better going into your first season in the SEC with those dudes. The same for Branson Hickman. Yes, we're big Josh Bates fans. We think that he's going to have a really, really strong career for the Oklahoma Sooners. Sometimes that developmental track isn't a straight line. There's ups and downs, and he's still trending in a good direction. I thought he looked pretty good at the spring game, but if he's not quite ready to play a full season yet, that's okay. He's still just a sophomore, and might even be still like a redshirt freshman. So there's time for him to continue to develop to eventually take over that center spot. But Branson Hickman gives you a guy with a ton of snaps to his body of work that can come in right away and be a significant player and a significant difference maker for you on the offensive line. He's seen so much. He's played in a really good SMU offense. So this is a dude that's going to help Jackson Arnold. He's going to help Fabechi Wiwu and whoever ends up playing left guard. If it's a Jacob Sexton, or if it turns out to be Heath Ozida, you're going to feel a lot better about who you put at left guard. I think you'll feel good about Jacob Sexton playing left guard, but if it happened to be Heath Ozida, because your best five includes Ozida at guard and Sexton at left tackle, then you're going to feel a lot better having an experienced veteran like Branson Hickman playing center to help Ozida continue to develop. And I think it's just going to be good for everybody to have that experienced voice in the offensive line room, much like we had it with Andrew Rame and with Creed Humphrey before that. Having that experience matters, even though it's all, American conference, experience. It's not big time Power 4 conference experience. It's experience, and that kind of stuff matters. And he's going to be able to help Jackson Arnold diagnose and see things pre-snap that's going to help the offensive line just be in a much better spot. So I think they've done a great job. I think they're winners of the portal season, and they addressed the needs that they needed to address and can go into the summer workout session feeling pretty good about where the roster's at right now.
And we dissected in our most recent episode that the Damonic Williams saga, the victory there, it says a lot about what Oklahoma's NIL efforts, their recruiting efforts, that sort of takes on a life of its own, I think. And maybe, Deion Burks and some others throughout this transfer portal season for Oklahoma about how serious this staff and the Crimson and Cream Collective, all of it, how serious of players Oklahoma is going into the SEC. Branson Hickman, we'll see, right, if he's going to be somebody that's going to start for Oklahoma. Just to your point, I think that certainly he's a 2 deep, 3 deep kind of guy for Oklahoma. And we've discussed it a lot that with Everett, you hope, you hear that he's probably going to be back, maybe even for the start of the season, but a couple of weeks in is the expectation that that's when Everett would be full go back for Oklahoma. But injuries, just nothing's guaranteed in that regard. You could have a setback. Something could not go according to plan. So for Oklahoma to have gotten itself, even if it's not a starter in Hickman, another backup plan to go with Joshua Bates and others, a Garen Hatchett maybe inside its offensive line, I think that was important for Oklahoma. Do we think OU's done?
Just based on the numbers, I just don't know where else they go. It's hard for me to see a definitive spot where they need to add somebody, but it's also hard to just pinpoint where the numbers would come from, where they'd be able to get to the scholarship limit by the time fall camp rolled around. The depth is really nice on this team. We've talked about it at different times. Safety looks good. Cornerback, you've got options, from Woody Washington to Des Malone, Kanai Walker, your young guys, and Jacoby Johnson and Makari Vickers. Jaden Rowe is still a dude that's on the roster that people have been impressed by. Linebacker, we've talked ad nauseum about how deep the linebacker spot is. Edge, you like where you're at edge. You just need an R. Mason Thomas or an Adepoju Adebaware to break out. Otherwise, with Ethan Downs and Caden Woolard and Trace Ford, I think you like those three as well. Defensive tackle, we just talked about. Offensive line feels pretty solid at this point. Has to come together, has to develop. And then wide receiver is stacked. Whenever Angelo Anthony's back and Jalil Farouk's back, Emmett Jones is going to really have one of those good problems on his hands to figure out how he's going to get these guys all playing time and get them all snaps and get them all looks, because they're really, really deep at wide receiver. And then I think we're seeing that the running back room is looking pretty good. We've not seen a Javante Barnes transfer portal declaration. So I have to assume that he's still on the roster and he's going to be playing for the Sooners in 2023 or 2024. So, that makes your running back room look that much better. And then with Taylor Tatum coming in, I don't see a place where you're struggling or you're lacking for talent or depth.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't feel like there's anything glaring beyond the areas we've kind of dissected a lot and spent a ton of time on. Defensive tackle, they helped themselves a lot. You supplemented a little bit up front. Still just offensive line in general. We'll see how it goes. Tight end, again, you heard all those great things about Bauer Sharp. I know Roberts has been dealing with the injury, so it's tough to fully evaluate what the spring brought for Oklahoma and how much they've helped themselves there. We didn't see a ton from Devon Mitchell in the spring game, but that would still be an area of question. If not concern, then question for me going into this next season. But by and large, I love what Oklahoma's done from the winter portal season to the spring portal season. They've helped themselves a lot.
Have helped themselves a lot. It's going to be one of those things every offseason. We're going to see Oklahoma go and they're going to find significant players and difference makers for them in the portal. They've done it again this offseason, and I think it's going to have a huge impact on 2024. The Sooners lost a couple of fan favorites to the transfer portal as well last week. We got one with a new home and one that's maybe heading north. We'll talk about it next, coming up here on Locked On Sooners. When you're hiring for your small business, you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. It isn't just another job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else. Even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're looking in the wrong place. On LinkedIn, 86% of small businesses get a qualified candidate within 24 hours. Hire professionals like a professional on LinkedIn. 2.5 million small businesses use LinkedIn for hiring. So go post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. The Oklahoma Sooners lost a couple of players to the transfer portal this past week. As expected, it was bound to happen. We were going to see a few things move, but Gavin Freeman was one of those dominoes to fall. He entered the transfer portal, and it did not take long for him to find a new home as he's heading to Oklahoma State, Josh.
No, it didn't take long at all. And obviously wish Gavin Freeman well. Hope that he can find a productive career going forward for himself at Oklahoma State. And, I don't know that there's a ton more to be said about it. Certainly nothing negative. Wish Gavin Freeman well. I don't think that he was a long-term player at Oklahoma. We saw him, used in the specials department. That had brought about and received criticism, and understandably so at times. The wide receiver core, I don't think Gavin Freeman was probably long-term cracking that equation really for Oklahoma. So for those reasons, it makes sense to go see if there's an opportunity somewhere else and to stay close to home and stay in state and to go to Oklahoma State, which now, because of the way Oklahoma and Oklahoma State's futures are no longer aligned at the hip, I think makes this all the easier to stomach, and probably shouldn't have been difficult to stomach regardless, but makes it even easier for Oklahoma fans to stomach, because guess what? There is no Bedlam in the future. There's no conference battle in the future for Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. So I think you just say, hey, good luck, Gavin.
Yeah, it's business, right? And that's part of college football at this point. It kind of reminds me a little bit to a lesser extent of watching DeMarco Murray leave the Dallas Cowboys for the Philadelphia Eagles. It was weird to see him in an Eagles jersey, but you knew that the opportunity wasn't going to be there for Dallas because they weren't willing to pay him. And so he went to the place that was willing to pay him, and that was Philadelphia. It's just business. And that's not to say that Gavin Freeman's getting this big lucrative contract from Oklahoma State. I have no knowledge of any of that, but it's an opportunity for him to stay in state where he's called home and to play for a program that is doing a pretty good job at developing wide receivers. I think, you look at Rashad Owens and Brennan Presley, like that's a pretty impressive group. And if he can kind of fit that Brennan Presley wide receiver slot role, I think that fits him really, really well. Just has to continue to develop that punt return game because he's got some skill. I think he just lost a little bit of confidence in what he was going to do. And maybe that lack of confidence led to a little bit of indecisiveness, and it just wasn't quite there. So hopefully he gets that confidence back over the offseason, and I think he's going to be a playmaker for them. The other one that was interesting was General Booty is leaving the Oklahoma Sooners, going to hit the transfer portal, and he's got a lot of options out there. There have been a lot of teams in contact with him thus far. One of those is the Iowa Hawkeyes, which Josh and I were talking pre-show that actually be a pretty good fit. One, because we know Iowa wants to run the football, and he's a pretty good runner of the football himself. And I mean, with the defense that they have, you just need General to go in and throw for 200, 225 a game and not turn the ball over. And that could potentially make the Hawkeyes a contender.
Well, and look, the Hawkeyes have 2 scholarship quarterbacks on roster right now. And I don't know how closely our listening and viewing audience was following the spring festivities of the Iowa Hawkeyes. Probably not super closely, but one of those, Cade McNamara, coming off the ACL injury, does not look physically close. Now, could he get there by next season? Okay, maybe. But right now, it looks like a big if in Iowa City. Marco Linez would be the other scholarship quarterback. And then James Razor is going to arrive in the summer for Iowa. But that's not a lot of scholarship quarterbacks in college football. I mean, you need more than 3, especially when one of those is a true freshman that is not an early enrollee. So, Booty would have a chance to come to Iowa and maybe be a serious player because of kind of what the forecast looks like in Iowa City with McNamara's health. I mean, Marco Linez has not taken that thing away from anybody. Now, is that a Kirk Ferentz thing? Maybe, right? But it would be an interesting fit. We haven't seen General Booty in this serious role where he's asked to drop back and throw the football 20 times. But again, it's probably not what you're going to be asked to do a whole bunch at Iowa anyways. So it makes sense again for General Booty to, if he's getting interest from a program like Iowa and from others, some smaller schools too, right? In addition to Iowa, to explore that, to see if he can go have a serious starting role.
Yeah, he's also getting opportunities with Louisiana Monroe, Samford, Tulsa, UTSA. I mean, going to that Kevin Wilson offense wouldn't be too bad either for Booty if he's looking to maybe expand his career opportunities. Wilson's offense would be quite notable, I think. Josiah Wagner landed with Cal, and that set forth several impressive additions by Cal. Ryan Yates, who the former Denton Geyer teammate of Peyton Bowen and Jackson Arnold, who had been at LSU, also headed to Cal. So it's interesting. We see the transfer portal workings. We see the guys going in, the guys coming out. And for Oklahoma, I mean, aside from, Josiah Wagner, you didn't really, I don't want to say lose anything, but you didn't really lose anybody that was on a big time trajectory. Maybe Justin Harrington to Oregon. That was a guy that could have factored into the Cheetah rotation this coming season. But I mean, you don't feel like it's a big blow to your depth chart for these guys to find opportunities elsewhere.
The spring season, definitely not. When you're talking about what Oklahoma's picture on the roster looked like and who departed, General Booty, Gavin Freeman, Justin Harrington, Shane Witter, and Josiah Wagner. Now, obviously would entertain conversation for Caden Green in what his future could have looked like at Oklahoma. But historically, though, in the transfer portal, okay, Caleb Williams, obviously. Caleb Williams, obviously, for Oklahoma. But beyond that, I'm thinking back and maybe the transfer portal, you're even predating this a little bit, but Trey Sermon would be a name that left and obviously was impactful at Ohio State. But beyond Caleb Williams, Trey Sermon, and Caden Green, and we'll see, right, what Caden Green's career ultimately winds up being. It was off to a fast start at Oklahoma. Long story short is there's not just been this surge of players leaving the University of Oklahoma and going and turning into, first round, second round, third round NFL draft picks. I mean, for the most part, with all due respect, the folks that have left Oklahoma because they probably weren't going to play at Oklahoma.
Yeah, and the depth chart is such that you can lose a Justin Harrington and feel okay about your options because you like what Kendall Dolby's been able to do at Cheetah. Samuel Omasigo is, sorry, I butchered that. Samuel Omasigo is looking really good as well. Just a very athletic player that's ascending at Cheetah as well. We know we got to Sam McCullough, who's continuing to develop at that position, also playing a little bit of weak side linebacker. Yeah, it's hard to feel bad about where you stand after those losses. Obviously, the Caden Green thing, that's a winter portal subtraction, and it was one that is felt and still felt to this day. I think it would have helped Oklahoma's offensive line this year. You can't help but not think that. But you're going to have an interesting offseason to figure this out over the rest of the summer and into the fall. But we know Bill Bedenbaugh has done a good job over the course of his career at figuring it out. He just knows how to figure stuff out. I can't remember what movie that's from, but that's pretty good. Pretty good. It's like some Bruce Willis line. Just good at figuring stuff. Oh, it's Armageddon. He's talking to Billy Bob Thornton's character, NASA, when Billy Bob's talking to Bruce Willis about going up on this asteroid and drilling a hole. He's like, this is the best you can come up with. You're NASA. You're the people that just figure stuff out. Bill Bedenbaugh is just one of those people that just figures stuff out. And they're doing it, and they'll do it again. I have full confidence this offensive line is going to come together. All that to say, how big is Oklahoma, Texas in the Red River Showdown this year? How much of an impact did last year's win have on the recruiting trail? We'll talk about that next, coming up here on Locked On Sooners.
All right, game off. We got to pause here to talk more about Monopoly Go. I know what you're saying. Flag on the play. You already talked about that, but there's just so much good stuff in this game. In Monopoly Go, you could team up with friends for time tournaments where you work together to build up each other's boards. The more you win together, the more awesome prizes you unlock, and there's so much to get, like unique stickers that you can trade with friends to complete albums for big prizes, cool new playing pieces to travel the boards with, hilarious emojis for taunting friends when you smash their buildings or heist their vaults. Plus, Monopoly Go, it feels new and exciting every day with constantly changing tournaments and challenges. A ton include their own unique minigames like digging for treasure or a robot pachinko machine. And there's always new timed events that help you win big, like massive multipliers for everything you win or rent frenzies. There's always something fun to discover in Monopoly Go, so get off the bench and go download it now. Free on Google Play or the App Store. Game on.
OU Texas, it's a big game every single year. It doesn't matter who else is on the schedule. It is the game of games. It's one of the best games in America. Every time you see one of those top games in college football for each season, OU Texas, the Red River Showdown is going to be amongst that because it carries a ton of significance, not just in the conference title race, the national championship outlook, but it carries some significance on the recruiting trail as well, as Oklahoma and Texas contend for a lot of the same players, similar players. But Josh, how significant do you think that OU win was for Oklahoma this past year on the recruiting trail? We were referencing a story by friend of the show, Joey Hickey, down at Longhorns Wire, colleague of ours. I'm at Sooners Wire. Josh is at Hawkeyes Wire. And Joey is down there at Longhorns Wire. He's kind of rubbed the Sooner Nation wrong a few times over the years, but he's a good writer, good dude, does a good job. But this is an interesting piece, and I recommend anybody go check it out. He thinks that this year for Texas is very significant, and they've got to win. This is like a must-win game for Sark and for the Texas Longhorns to kind of reestablish their recruiting superiority in the state of Texas.
You know, I can't speak for Texas fans, but I don't know that you can come into this thing and say that it's any more important this year for Texas than it's been, the last couple of years. The loser of the Red River game the year before, I think always feels, maybe that the fan base anyways, a greater sense of urgency to go win that game because you lost it the year before. After Oklahoma got embarrassed 49-0 a couple of years ago, we were sitting here talking about, look, it's the largest OU Texas game since XYZ year, in large part because of the way that game played out. So I do think there's a lot of that at play right here, which is OU beat them the last time they played this game, but every OU Texas game is gigantic.
Massive.
It's always huge for recruiting. It's always typically for the winner of the game, a good litmus test of can you go do great things that season, right? And so for those reasons, it's gigantic again for Oklahoma. I think it's every bit as important for OU as it is for Texas. Oklahoma's the team that folks are down on nationally. It's not Texas. Texas lost this game a year ago. And listen to what the national media has to say about Oklahoma versus Texas. It's all rainbows and sunshine for Texas. For Oklahoma, it's I don't know if they're set up the way Texas is going into this SEC. So on and on, right? So from that standpoint, it's every bit as important to Oklahoma in its perception nationally and its hopes next season than it is to Texas. You're just going to have a hard time convincing me that the Texas game is more important to Texas than it is to Oklahoma on any season.
Yeah, it's always important. It doesn't matter what happened the year before. It's always the game. My wife, OU alum, got her undergrad, graduate degrees from Oklahoma, spent a lot of time and money at the University of Oklahoma, has told me for years, the game that matters the most is OU Texas. And listen, she's not a big sports fan, but she is a big time college football fan and Oklahoma fan. And she could tell you, and we've talked about it a lot over the years, got to beat Texas, got to beat Texas, got to beat Texas, got to beat Texas. And I think that's true for a lot of Oklahoma fans. Like, if obviously you want to go win national championships, you want to win conference championships, but if you're not going to do either one of those things, you better win OU Texas. That is the one that really sets the tone for a season, as you mentioned, Josh, but I think it also sets the tone as a coaching staff and it sets the tone in a lot of ways. So it always carries a ton of importance. It doesn't carry any more importance now because Oklahoma won or because UT lost for UT. It doesn't carry any more importance. It carries a ton of importance. It's significant and it's going to stay significant because it's going to be one of those games that gets continued to play every single year, no matter what the SEC schedule and divisional format or, quadrants format looks like. They're always going to play. And so they're always going to be the ones testing each other for how they're going to be doing that given season. So yeah, I mean, I get where Joey's coming from for a guy like Sark, who sometimes it feels like not all of Texas fandom is bought in on Sark still, even though he just took him to the playoff and had a 11-win season and they won the Big 12 title. I think everybody's still kind of unsure. I mean, it's kind of a must win because if Brent Venables goes back to back and beats Texas in a season in which everybody still feels like Texas is the better team, has the better program, has the better trajectory, that won't look great. But I think this is one of those things we go through all the time with Texas, right? They always think Texas is a step ahead of Oklahoma, even after they just lost 11 NFL draft picks. Apparently that doesn't affect their depth at all. So I don't know. I think Oklahoma is going to be in just as good a shape as Texas going into this season. If there's one area of concern, it's the concern that everybody has, it's offensive line. But I feel like the defense is ahead of where Texas is. I feel like the quarterback situations aren't that far apart, even though Quinn Ewers is much more experienced. I think the skill position players, I think Oklahoma might have an edge there. So you'd be hard pressed to tell me that this game doesn't matter any more than it ever does, but that Texas needs to win it more because of their trajectory than Oklahoma. No, it's still the biggest game of the season for both teams.
Well, it's a weird thing because I do think it's very important from a recruiting standpoint. It's a must win for both always. And now because of the way college football has changed, it's less of a must win than ever. Right. I mean, you could lose this game. And if you play great the rest of the season or even lose one other game, I mean, you're right in the mix in the SEC to get into the college football playoff. And what you do from there will go a long way as well in determining whether or not it was a successful season or a failed season, on and on and on. Right. So now it's always a must win. Right. Mm-hmm. I come back. It's OU Texas. And yet it's because of the nature of college football now, it's like, you can lose this game and still have a great season, more than you ever could before. So that part of it, because of the way college football has changed with the 12 teams in the college football playoff, and maybe that number is going to grow, that part of it's different. But just looking at where these two are at right now, John, Sark got the first one, Venables got the second one, and because this is the rubber game between the two early in their respective tenures, that does probably heighten the importance from a recruiting standpoint and the long-term picture of this rivalry. If Oklahoma and Venables can capture it, does this turn into, Bob Stoops having Mac Brown's number, Brent Venables having Sark's number? And remember, it not that it was 49-0, but Bob Stoops did not win that first Red River game versus Mac Brown and company. And then he obviously asserted dominance over the course of time in that Red River game. So is that at stake for Oklahoma a little bit this year?
Potentially. And as we sit here on May 6th, the year of our Lord 2024, I'm going to put it out there. Oklahoma's going to beat Texas again this year. And that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Thanks so much for tuning in and being a part of the show. Subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms and on YouTube. Hit that notification bell to let you know when new episodes drop. Follow Josh on Twitter, also known as X, at JoshOnRef. Follow myself at John9 Williams. The show is at Locked On Sooners. But until next time, he's Josh. I'm John. Boomer Sooner.